Erev Tov, and thanks to all of you for being here, both in person and an equally, if not larger, number of folks who are joining us on Zoom. And as I mentioned, I apologize for our slightly delayed start, but we have tried to dramatically improve our tech so that the audio quality for those joining us on Zoom should be much clearer without the big booming echoes of having to hear the microphone. But hopefully this is coming through crisp and clear. To those on Zoom, if you have any audio issues, please chat them in so we can try to address them. Tonight is Kristallnacht, and as we've reminded each other over recent years, we also call this night Pogromnacht, so as not to paper over with the image just of twinkling broken glass what really was a night of massive destruction, of the destruction of over 1,400 synagogues and over 7,500 Jewish businesses damaged or destroyed, dozens of people killed, likely many more, and the beginning of the arrests and incarcerations and deportations of so many Jews that in so many ways, although we understand its roots years and years earlier, began in earnest the story of the Shoah. It has been our commitment as a Bayit, beginning with honoring the stories of our survivors and their lives, and now moving forward through the second and third generations, to live out never again, not just in the ways we move about in the world, in oppression and mistreatment of any person, but most centrally, preserving Holocaust memory, lifting it up, acknowledging the threats of anti-Semitism where they rise and have been emboldened in these last 2 years, and to mark and remember the dates which have been set aside as sacred dates of memory for the story and for our history and for our reality of the Shoah. We have a fixed program on Yom HaShoah, our Yom HaShoah Seder, and so Kristallnacht has become the night of commemoration in which we offer a wide range of programs, films, discussions, lectures, in the context of memory and in the context of continuing to think about our evolving roles and responsibilities in Shoah memory. So tonight we begin, as we always do, lighting a candle and with the memorial prayer for the victims of the Shoah. And then after that, I'll introduce our wonderful speaker, Janet Kirshheimer, who will bring us on a journey that includes both her family's story and the role that she has played as an artist and poet and filmmaker, interweaving Shoah memory with art, a new and different, important way, and the continuation of an always there way to tell our stories and to honor the memory of our fellow Jews, of our family members, of our greater family. I want to invite Ruth Couch to come forward to light the candle of memory. Ruth's mother lived through Kristallnacht. The synagogues of her community were burned, and she died just this past year. She was a person who modeled strength, resilience, combating hate and violence with light and love and learning and leading. And we remember her, Elspeth, and we invite Ruth to come forward and light the memorial candle. Light that one and use it to light the bigger one.
Or should I hand it to him? Just light it. At first they were like, this is fine because some people came home. They would come home. Oh,
I'll ask everyone to rise for the El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Dayan Almanot V'Avi Yatomim, Al Na Techeshe V'Titapak L'Dam Yisrael Shenishpach Kamayim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Al Kanfei HaShechina, B'Mahalot Kedoshim U'Tohorim, Kezohar Harakia Meirim U'Mazhirim, L'nishmotehem shel rivavot alfei Yisrael, Anashim v'nashim Yiladim v'Yiladot, Shenehergu v'nishchatu, v'nisrefu v'nechneku v'nikberu chayim, Ba'aratzot asher nagea bahen yad hatzorer הגרמני וגרurav, Kulam kedoshim u'tohorim, ובהם גאונים וצדיקים, ארזי הלבנון אדירי התורה, בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. לכן בעל הרחמים, יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו ושלום על משכבם, ונאמר אמן. God full of mercy, just one of widows and father of orphans, be not silent nor hold your peace for the blood of Israel that was shed like water. Grant fitting rest on the wings of the divine presence with the holy and pure who shine and radiate light like the radiance of heaven, to the souls of the millions of Jews, men, women, and children, who were murdered, slaughtered, burned, strangled, and buried alive in the lands touched by the German enemy and its followers. They were all holy and pure. Among them were great scholars and righteous individuals, cedars of Lebanon, and noble masters of Torah. May the Garden of Eden be their resting place. God of compassion, shelter them in the shadow of your wings forever, and bind their souls in the bond of everlasting life. God is their heritage. May they rest in peace. Let us say Amen. You can be seated. Before I introduce Janet, I want to mention that we're in the second year of 5 years in which our Kristallnacht program has been dedicated by Charlie Solomon and family, in memory of Charlie's beloved wife and our beloved community member, Dr. Joan Long Solomon, Zichronah Livracha. Her photo adorned the table and the entrance. She dedicated herself and her gifts to Holocaust research, both here and abroad, writing, speaking, and creating memorialization, also through artwork, through beautiful calligraphy and other arts, while building bridges for future generations. She returned many times to the village of her family and connected with those seeking to create peace and reconciliation, dedicating Stolpersteine, the stumbling stones, and creating a new vision of a better future. We miss her and we remember her on this night and always. It's an honor to invoke her name at this time. I'm grateful to Janet for the opportunity to share her wisdom and her art and her family story with us. She's the author of How to Spot One of Us, a collection of poems about the Shoah and her family, a book I would say you must own if you don't yet. A Pushcart Prize nominee, her work has appeared in numerous journals, and her essays on Holocaust memory have been featured in the New York Jewish Week and the Wisdom Daily. She's the producer of the award-winning film After, Poetry Destroys Silence, which we had the privilege to screen here at the beginning of the year, in which contemporary poets and actors confront the Shoah, named one of the best films of 2024 by RogerEbert.com. She's really a person of grace and depth and wisdom, whose voice is so important in a moment of anti-Semitism and in a moment when Shoah memory feels ever more important. And we're grateful to her for sharing her perspectives, her art, and her words with us this evening.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Rav Stephen and everyone at the Bayit, especially Yael and now Hannah, for commemorating Kristallnacht, and thank you to the synagogues and schools that have joined as partners. It means so much to me, and I know how appreciative my father would be that you are here. It was evening, and it was morning. Those 2 days history records as Kristallnacht. The name almost sounds poetic, a night of crystal, but it was far from it. Beginning on the night of November 9th, 1938, German leaders unleashed a nationwide anti-Jewish riot throughout the Reich. The violence was supposed to look like an unplanned outburst of anger against the Jews, but in reality it was state-sponsored vandalism, arson, murder, and terror. The numbers vary widely, but more than 1,400 synagogues were burned or vandalized. Thousands of Jewish-owned businesses had their windows smashed. Apartments and homes were robbed and people beaten. At least 100 people were murdered. About 26,000 to 30,000 Jewish men were sent to concentration camps. In the aftermath of Kristallnacht, the Nazi regime ordered the Jewish community to pay 1 billion Reichsmark, an atonement payment for the damages done. My father, Julius Kirchheimer, was born in the village of Niederstetten in the region of Schwabia, southern Germany. He was the fifth of 6 children. His father and grandfather were cattle dealers and farmers. He told me that, of course, there was anti-Semitism, but things were pretty good for the Jews. His ancestors had lived in Germany for many hundreds of years, perhaps even longer, and that his family had good relations with their non-Jewish neighbors. There was an Orthodox synagogue, and it was lay-led. A traveling rabbi would come once a month or so to give a sermon. The village led a life of what we call today modern Orthodoxy. Not long after the rise of the Nazis, on Shabbos morning, March 25th, 1933, 3 stormtroopers came into my father's house, ransacked it, stole personal belongings, and arrested his father. My father ran to shul to see who else had been taken. It was 7 other men. They were beaten with metal rods and hoses from their necks to their feet in front of burning wood stoves until they passed out. His father returned home with bruises all over his body. There was no clear skin. At Sunday services, a local clergy, Pastor Umfrid, told his congregation what had happened to the Jews. Nazi leaders asked him to retract his sermon. He refused and was arrested. 2 weeks later, they said he committed suicide. What I'd like to read now are a few poems about life before Kristallnacht. Summer afternoon, 1934. There was a camp, my father tells me, about 3 kilometers from our town, where young men lived, part of Arbeitsdienst, the National Labor Service, constructing the Autobahn, bridges, and flood control dikes. About 100 men marched past our house on the way back to the camp in their uniforms, carrying spades, singing, "Wenn das Judenblut von dem Messer spritzt," when Jewish blood sprays from the knife, dann geht's nochmals so gut, it will be much better. Uncle Max and I watched them march by. They can't do more than kill us, he said. Traces. Sometimes we had to let chickens die of old age, my father says. It was against the law to have meat kosher killed. But sometimes the shochet, Gerson Rosenthal, gave me his knife after Shacharis. I hid it in a pocket of my lederhosen and rode my bike home. At night, Gerson came to the front door carrying a pen and paper to look like he was collecting for charity. And my mother and I carried a few chickens to the cellar. He slaughtered them. My mother plucked the feathers and gave him some meat to take home, while I buried the blood in the garden and the feathers at the bottom of the manure pile next to the barn. I didn't pour the blood into the brook behind our house. Someone might see it floating. The next morning, I put the knife back in my lederhosen, rode my bike to shul, and returned it to Gerson. My mother canned the meat and served it only on a holiday. We only had the shochet come when my father wasn't home. He didn't want us to do anything that would get us arrested, and never knew what we'd done until he came to the table. Berlin to Hamburg, summer 1938. They slept in haystacks, 4 boys on a bike trip, stole potatoes, prayed with talis and tefillin each morning in fields. Farmers chased them out. They rode fast, wearing lederhosen and caps, brown shirt boys chasing them. My father met an old gypsy woman by the roadside. She told him, "You must be one of us. Black hair, black eyes, dark skin. The Germans must have stolen you." In Hamburg, he visited his aunt, Tante Therese. She made him tea with milk, just like the English, for the first time. He didn't know it would be the last. The Nuremberg laws were enacted in 1935 for the protection of German blood and German honor. Jews were not Aryans. They belonged to a separate race that was inferior. Jews were a separate class with no political rights. And I'd like to read one more poem about my father and his little brother. Brothers. Bula is what my father's little brother, Yosef, used to call him when they were kids. Sometimes I have trouble remembering that my father got to be a kid, that there was a time when he hadn't gotten a note in his report card saying that Jews could no longer attend school with Aryan children, when he didn't get chased off the field for playing soccer with the other kids, when he didn't see the Jews not welcome sign at the public pool, and he and his friends didn't have brown-shirted boys chasing after them on a bike trip. And sometimes I wonder what it would be like if Yosef were able to call. Then came Kristallnacht. On the night of November 9th, as the rioting began, my father hid in the cellar of his home with his parents, Sheni and Shimon, and his older sister Ruth and younger brother Yosef. They closed the windows and the wooden shutters over them so the glass wouldn't break when rocks were thrown at the house. The next morning, my father was ordered to report to town hall. He rode his bicycle. My father and 9 men were loaded onto a truck and sent to a county jail. On Friday afternoon, the wife of one of the arrested men brought challah and wine to the jail. She was assured it would be given to the prisoners. 2 days later, they were put on a bus and sent to Dachau. My father told me he knew what Dachau was and was very afraid when he was told that they were being taken there. The camp began in 1933 and housed Jehovah's Witnesses, Roma, gypsies, gay men, and others, quote-unquote, undesirables. When my father was ordered to report to town hall, his mother gave him his winter coat. And when he got there, he put his hands in one pocket and he thought that his mother sent him with a sandwich, but it was his siddur. In the other pocket, his tefillin. Before I read some poems, I just want to explain a couple of terms. They used, in my father's area, the word gendarme from the French for local police, and capos were the non-Jewish political prisoners in Dachau who served in an administrative capacity. Town hall. What for, my father asked. What did I do? I'm only 16. And the gendarme told him if he didn't like it, if he asked any more questions, he could go home. They'd arrest his father instead. And he saw his father paying his tax bill in the next room. And he didn't call out, afraid they'd arrest him too, afraid his father would want to take his place. And the gendarme said he had a job to do, a quota of 10 men, and he didn't care how he filled it. And my father knew the gendarme, went to school with his daughter. He was told to empty his pockets, turn in any money and weapons, and he turned in his pocket knife and told the gendarme he had to go to the bathroom. And another gendarme, Wilhelm, took him, and he knew Wilhelm too. He told Wilhelm not to worry, he wasn't going to run away, and Wilhelm said he knew, but he was just doing his job. As my father and 9 men were loaded on a truck that said "Drink Coca-Cola," he turned and saw Wilhelm crying like a child. Breaking laws. Kristallnacht, broken glass. Nazis arrest him, 16 years old. Dachau, November 1938. A striped cotton uniform. It's almost winter. He shares a bunk with a man in his 50s who freezes to death one night. The next morning, a capo tells him, take off the man's long underwear, do it quickly before the SS come for the body. You will freeze at night too if you don't. It is the custom of some Jews not to wear clothes from a dead body, and to save one's life, the rabbis teach one must break custom. He washes the underwear that night, places it over a chair next to the wood stove to dry, sleeps on it, still damp, to make sure no one will steal it. Lines. My father stood in line to be photographed, stood in line to be fingerprinted, stood in line to have his head shaved. You're young to be here, a capo told him as he got to the front of another line and gave his name, hometown, age, occupation, student. And he saw men standing in another line, saw men standing naked on a concrete slab. And the capo told my father, hold your breath when the SS aim the fire hoses at your mouth. If you don't, you'll swallow water, choke, lose your balance. The SS will gang up on you. They're only kids. They'll get a kick out of it. He stood in line to strip, naked. He stood in line to turn in his winter coat, his clothes, his shoes. He stood in line to stand on that concrete slab. If you were lucky, you got a hat, my father said. Told to strip, he stood in line, got examined by an SS doctor for skin diseases and bruises. Told to go, then got beaten by an SS guard. Stood in line to get a blue and white striped cotton jacket and pants, yellow triangles stenciled on each, leather shoes with no lining, a pair of cotton socks, 2 patches with numbers, a cotton blue and white striped hat, was marched to his barracks, given a needle and thread, told to sew 1 patch on his shirt, the other on his pants, and pass the needle to the next man. And each morning was marched out to line up between the barracks at 4 o'clock, was counted, stood until the capos marched him to the Appellplatz for roll call, stood at attention for hours, was told by the commandant to put his hand on his head, take off his hat, and at the commandant's command, slap it down on his thigh. Thousands of us, my father said, sounded like a cannon shot. A simple gesture. It was December, 4:00 in the morning, the air clear and cold. I could see the Bavarian Alps. I stood in the roll call line next to Dr. Spatz. The SS would pick on him. A lieutenant asked him, "If I were to shoot you now, what would you do about it?" He gave the SS officer's rank, gave his own, the same as all Jewish prisoners, Schutzhaftjude, protected Jew, then spoke. I could not do anything. Once Dr. Spatz answered without giving the SS officer's rank. He knocked off the doctor's glasses, beat him in the face. My father waited until the SS officer left, picked up the glasses, and gave them back to Dr. Spatz. One night, a man went crazy in the barracks. We told him to stop, my father said. We told him the SS would take him. We tried to stop his screaming, his flailing arms. The capos heard him, came and tried to restrain him. They took him into the latrine, put his head under water. They couldn't stop his screaming, his flailing arms. They called from capo to capo, from barracks to barracks, until it reached SS headquarters. The SS came, took him outside. We heard the hoses turned on him, then a shot. Then we went to sleep. And it was Hanukkah 1938 when my father found out that he was going to be released. So I want to read you that poem and then tell you more about it. Release from Dachau. I had a dream last night, my father tells me. He dreamed the capos woke him up at 4:00 in the morning on Friday, December 23rd, 1938, made him strip out of his uniform, made him wait in line for an SS doctor to examine him for bruises and frostbite, made him listen to speeches by the SS warning him to get out of Germany and never return. They warned him if he didn't, he'd be sent back to Dachau and never leave. He dreamed he was assigned a place in another line, waited to return his uniform and get his own clothes, shoes, and coat, and that the SS drove him to an area about 4 miles from the Munich train station, then made him march the rest of the way. The sky was so black he couldn't see the man who gave him a ticket. It took 12 hours, and he changed trains twice. He had no money, no food. The train arrived on Shabbos morning, and he didn't want to see another person's face. He took the back way home through the fields, crossing 8 railroad tracks, careful not to get caught in the track switches. His father was the first person to see him. As he opened the shutters, he closed each night, so no one could throw rocks into the house. He went through the front gate into the house, saw his mother had baked challahs and ate an entire one. He went to sleep at 11:00 in the morning and slept until the next day. That's exactly how it happened, my father tells me. That's how I got home. Can you believe I still dream about it 60 years later? My father said he was released early because he had applied for visas, one to then Palestine and one for America. And the Nazi government was afraid of what these people would say if they went somewhere, and perhaps the government would find out what was going on. An older brother got out to Palestine, an older brother and sister got out to America. His parents, Ruth and Joseph, in a very long, complex story, made it to Maastricht, Holland in 1941. They were deported in August 1942 to Westerbork camp, and on November 2nd, sent to Auschwitz and murdered upon arrival on November 5th, 1942. When he was released, my father was given back his clothes, shoes, and tefillin. He did not get his siddur back. He thought one of the Jehovah's Witnesses most likely took it to read it. They were very interested in the Bible. And my father's visa finally came through in mid-1939. So I'd like to read you this poem. Getting a visa. The doctor made me strip, my father said. Listened to my heart and lungs. Made me walk down the hall to see if I limped. Sent me to another room where I waited while others were called. Watched as each raised his right hand, as each received a piece of paper. My name was called. I stood up, raised my hand, answered "yeah." The man laughed at me. I didn't understand what he said, but he gave me that piece of paper. Visa, U.S. Consulate, Stuttgart, a red ribbon attached to the corner. I heard teenagers in America wore white shoes in summer. I went to a shoe store. I wanted to be in style. My father was scheduled to leave on a ship departing from Antwerp on September 1st, 1939. That was the day the war broke out. In August, he received a call from the ship company that one place had opened up 2 weeks earlier. He left his family and traveled to Antwerp, where he boarded a ship that arrived in Hoboken on August 29th, 1939. He stayed with an aunt who had come to America in 1907 and lived at 1266 Grand Concourse. Okay. Setting out, and this poem has a short epigraph. It is not permitted to set out on a ship less than 3 days before Shabbos. This is said only for a voluntary purpose. For a mitzvah, it is permitted. Babylonian Talmud, Shabbos 19a. I almost lost all my photographs, my father tells me. My mother, sister, and brother brought me on Thursday to the train in Niederstetten. I got off in Aachen and waited with others for the train to Antwerp. The Gestapo pulled me out, searched my luggage, my family photographs, told me to take off my shoes and socks, search them, and then let me go. I missed the train and waited 2 hours for the next one. Shabbos morning, I walked to the boat. My name was called on the loudspeaker, and I reported to the purser, who said my large suitcase wasn't sent from the train station. He would drive me there if I wanted. If I didn't return on time, I would miss the ship. But those photographs were all I had. I found my suitcase, and the purser drove as fast as he could back to the ship. I climbed the gangplank about 4 stories high with my suitcase, and as I got close to the deck, a dock worker pushed the gangplank away. With all my might, I threw the suitcase on deck and jumped on the ship. A Chinese fellow and I played shuffleboard and ping pong. We couldn't talk to each other, but we understood each other. It was before I made new friends, before I met your mother. The Nazi government allowed emigres to leave with $10. I spent 3 in Antwerp, 1 aboard ship. Aunt Elsie came to the docks in Hoboken and took me to the Bronx. I came to America on August 29th, 1939, with $6 and my life. I'd like to read 2 poems about my father. Second. Learning a new language. My father is teaching me German. He still speaks fluently, even though he escaped from Nazi Germany almost 70 years ago when he was 17. We study nouns and verbs. We study when to use the formal pronoun sie, you, and when to use the more familiar du. One must be offered permission to use the familiar. We study dialects, the word ich, I. The Berliners pronounce it ich. Those from Frankfurt am Main, ich. Those from Schwaben, ich or I. He tells me when he was a kid, he and his friends used to say in a Berliner dialect, Berlin gewesen, Oranje gegessen, and sie war so süß gewesen. I was in Berlin and ate an orange, and it was very sweet. And then we added, dass mir die Brie die Gosch runtergelaufen ist, with the juices running down my mouth. He explains, it is in our Schwäbisch dialect. I should say, it was our dialect. Dogs. I came across something, my father tells me, as I'm driving to cardiac rehab. In my mind, as if his mind were a filing cabinet or the dish where coins and keys are kept. It was something an old man told him when he was a boy, how the stones freeze in winter, but the dogs who chase you don't. And 2 days later, we're sitting on the back porch on Rosh Hashanah afternoon, and he tells me that the way of life he grew up with in southern Germany no longer exists. And if he thinks about it too much, it will make him crazy and is not worth the consequences. And I want to tell him that I can hear the chazan singing in shul, and I can smell the raisin challahs his mother baked for a sweet new year. But it will not stop the dogs. So we just sit there and watch the birds that have gathered at the feeder. And I want to end with this story. I'm proud of my father for so many things, but this is one of the top reasons. In about 2008, my father's rabbi met a man whose father was an SS guard in Dachau. The son wanted to meet my father. He was born in Germany, and after finding out what his father did, he moved to France and changed his name. He married and refused to have children. You can still see what happened so clearly. The rabbi and this man came to the house, and my father was sitting in his favorite green chair, and pleasantries were exchanged. The man then got up and went over to my father's chair. He got down on his knees, took my father's hand, and asked for forgiveness. My father took a breath and looked at him and said, I can't. He then said, you didn't do anything to me. There is nothing to forgive you for. Your father did this to me, not you. My father and my mother, also a survivor, could have easily hated, and they were certainly entitled to that. But instead, they chose to love, and that's how they raised me. It's what they taught me through their actions in life, and I am forever grateful for that. So thank you, and Rav Stephen and I will do a Q&A, and we can continue a discussion. Okay. Here we go. No. But I'll talk about that. You can ask any questions you like. Good. Oh, thank you.
Okay, I'm here mostly to facilitate, so I want to, in a moment, open it up for your questions and comments. But before that, although we did not discuss any initial questions, as Janet, maybe this is too big a question. If you can reflect in some way on how you came to process your father's experience, your family's experience through the medium of poetry.
I think one thing that I'm incredibly grateful for is my parents told me their stories at very age appropriate. And they answered all my questions. As if anyone else here is a child of survivors, you know there are questions you can ask, and then you know there are things that you can't ask, and I had to leave their stories to them. And I always wanted to write about it, and I tried through essays, I tried through stories, and it just wasn't working. And once I started writing poetry, I realized that was the way to do it. It's about what's on the page, what's not on the page, the words I chose, the line breaks, the stanza breaks. Every comma, every word meant something, and it allowed me to say what I needed to say.
I just want to express appreciation for your poetry, and listening to you read and notice the frequency of the poems that sort of begin with an opening quote, comma, my father said,
Yeah.
and then sort of continue in his voice, and it's sort of a way of bringing us in with you as the momentary narrator, and then it flows into his voice, and it feels to me like a model for how we perpetuate Holocaust memory. If it was all in his voice without my father said,
Right.
there wouldn't be the voice of the next generation.
Right.
It's that way of naming ourselves as the ones who carry forward the story, and yet still trying to tell the story in their voice.
And I think before Steven Spielberg, it was the Fortunoff archives at Yale, and my father never wanted to do it, and he said, I want you to be my reporter. So I got to tell his story, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. And it was because my father, was 16 in there, but as he was growing up, he was able to process what was happening. My father could never get over the fact that his country turned on him. He just was stuck in this sort of philosophical and psychological loop. And I get that. And we talked a lot, and I asked questions about the food and the house and what the yard looked like and all those other things. I wanted to just not only know the details of Dachau and what happened to my family, but he had a life before the Holocaust, right? And right, as children of, we never did. It was always a part of our life, and I wanted to know what that life was like. That really fascinated me. And what would have happened? My parents never would have met in Germany, and that, what do you do with all of that? And we talked a lot.
Thank you. Open it up for questions and comments. Feel free to raise a hand. Let's start with Elliot. And then Elaine.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you.
You put up the famous quote by Adorno. I'm wondering what that means for you, especially since you write poetry,
Right.
not only about the Holocaust.
Right.
So I'll just repeat the question for those on Zoom about the opening quote from Adorno and what it means to you.
I think that, yes, it is barbaric to write poetry after Auschwitz. It is, but as human beings, we don't have anything else. We only have our language, and that's how we can describe these things. And I think that, especially for me as a poet, I can attempt to get towards something holy, to kind of change and flip the language of death into something else. So thank you for that.
Elaine.
No,
The question was whether your dad returned to Germany.
Yeah, no, neither of my parents could ever go back. The hurt was just too deep to go back. And I actually went for the first time in September 2019. They were putting up a monument in my mother's town, so I went to that, and then I got to go to Niederstetten, and I asked if whoever owns the house now, I don't want it back. I want nothing. I just want to see it. And the woman who owned it was lovely and invited me in, and she gave me time to just be in the house by myself. I said, I have to go down to the cellar because I wanted to stand in that space from Kristallnacht. I went out into the yard. One of the barns is still there. The brook is still there. And when I went into the house, on the right side is still that mark where the mezuzah was. There's that indenture into the wood that was never taken out. But they're not there anymore, but I was incredibly grateful to the woman who let me in. She actually let me in because a friend of my father's, they lived in a kind of double house, and the man who grew up on the other side of the house went back, and when the person who now owned the house saw him, tried to slam the door, and my father's friend stuck his foot into the door and said, I want to come in. But I have known this woman never did anything. I don't want anything from that house. I just wanted to see where they lived. And I was able to tell her things about the house that she didn't know. So that was something.
Nina?
And then we can go on Zoom also.
And sorry, I'm just going to interrupt Nina by saying those on Zoom, if you want to write questions into the chat, we have some coming in. Great.
Okay, great.
So many survivors couldn't talk about their
Yeah.
decades.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't sound like that was the experience that you had. What do you think was different? Or how did you get in and get stories flowing so soon after? And also I'm curious to know, where did you grow up? Like, where did your family end up reuniting and spending?
So Nina's questions about what seemed to open up the channel of sharing stories from so early compared to so many survivors' experiences, and about your own upbringing.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a real answer for that, because some people did speak. I had a friend who wanted to go back to where her mother was from, and her mother said, if you go back, I'll never speak to you again. So I think it's about an understanding of whatever that person went through and how they were able to deal with it. My mother was 6 years old, so she had very different experiences than my father, and I think we got more into the philosophy of it, and because I wanted to know about the house and the food and what the garden looked like and that sort of thing. And I think also because they kept it age appropriate, I think that's what helped open up. But as I said before, there were things I just couldn't ask. That was the end of that. And I had to leave them with their memories that just belonged to them. Because at one point my father told me, he said, this is what happened to me. I don't want you to suffer because of it. But I did want to know. And that may be because at that point I didn't know it was the poet in me, but the fact that I was trying to make sense of it also, and to try to write about it, to figure it out, maybe played into it. And when my parents got married, they lived Bennett Avenue up in Washington, Yucca Heights.
Okay, we'll take a question here, and then we'll go to Zoom questions, please.
The subject of reparations was deeply contentious, controversial in Israel. Did your father or your parents have an opinion about reparations, whether
Yeah.
survivors of the camps or those that lost whose relatives were
Right.
murdered?
A question about your parents' attitudes to reparations.
Yeah, they did. I know that they did get some reparations. That was something we didn't discuss a lot about, but I know that most of it they donated. They just couldn't keep it. It was blood money. So they couldn't keep it.
Take some questions from Zoom.
Okay. All Our first question from Zoom is from Nisan Hershkowitz, who says, Shabbos Hanukkah in 1938 was its seventh day, which was December 24th.
Okay.
Did your father ever attribute significance to that eve facilitating his Dachau release?
No. No, it was no miracle. It wasn't a miracle. No. My family didn't believe in those kinds of... The miracle would have been that Kristallnacht never happened. That would have been the miracle. So, no.
Okay, and then we have a few questions from Malka, who asks, have you also written about your mother?
Yes.
And for her, a little bit more information about her story.
Yeah, I have written about her. I think just tonight I just want to keep it about Kristallnacht, but I have written and spoken about her as well. And I apologize again, I don't know what happened about the film, but she's featured in the film with her story. When she was 6 years old, her parents were able to get her out to the Israeli Meisjes Weeshuis orphanage in Amsterdam. There were 104 girls and 4 survived.
Wow. Okay, sorry. And she also asks, what did your father do for a living in America, and did he speak Yiddish?
No. My parents spoke German. They learned, it was very easy for them to learn Yiddish here because of the German, but they did not speak Yiddish. When my father came here, he got a job with a kosher butcher delivering meat. He was still trying to get his family out, all the other 2 siblings who made it to America. They were just trying to make enough money to get the family out because you needed these affidavits to say that the people who were coming would not be a burden on the American society, and there were quotas. And his parents were older, and because there were 6 kids with a big space in between most of them, and so he took whatever job he could get in order to try to get his family out.
Great. There are a few more okay. We have another question of why was your father of blessed memory released from Dachau?
As I said before, because he had applied for visas, one to Palestine and one to America, and the German government didn't want people going back saying it's turned into a death camp, we were all beaten, whatever it was. They just wanted them to leave.
Great. And we have 3 more questions, and I'll just tell you all 3 because 2 of them are pretty quick. Where did your parents meet each other?
They met on a blind date.
Oh, cute. I love that. And then someone asks, where is it possible to view this movie?
Oh, well, thank you. The movie is actually available on Amazon or through our distributor, which is called Grasshopper Film. But if you go to after.film, you can see all the information there.
Great, thank you. And then a great question to end the Zoom on is someone, Harriet, shares that her father also survived Kristallnacht in Germany. It was courageous of you to confront all of your family's pain. How did you draw strength for this important personal journey?
Yeah, well, thank you, Harriet. I don't know. I think that it might be because somehow my parents got out of bed every day, and they started a new life, and they loved their children, and they went on, and that was enough for me, and I think we have to confront trauma and pain and grief, and my parents grieved every day of their lives, and so I think it's something that we have to do. It doesn't mean that there's an answer for it, or the grief is going to end, or even my grief when I think of the family I never got to meet. But I think that we have to talk about it, and we have to consider it from a lot of different ways. And there have been many books and films and all sorts of things, and people are trying to attempt to figure out what it means, knowing that we'll never figure it out. Once you start to get into the Holocaust, you're just a rat in a maze, and you'll never get out, ever. So.
Okay, I see a number of more hands. We're just going to go in this order. Ruth, Ronnie. I'm apologizing, I'm not remembering your name right, but Seth right behind Ronnie, and then Dorothy. And we're going to try to wrap up there.
So today, November 9th, is my son James Heinlei's birthday. So, and his grandmother is from Germany. She was there during Kristallnacht. And she was educated, she had a PhD. I mean, her life was wonderful before all of this. But every year, when it was my son's birthday, she would send a card and say, this is the same date as Kristallnacht. So he grew up every year knowing that it was Kristallnacht. And it was very hard to really, and she didn't talk negatively that much, but that was the one thing. But when he got married, she came to talk, she was very educated in many languages, and it all came together. He said, well, this is what it's all about. We survived, we're going to start a new family, our name will go on, et cetera, et cetera. And it kind of came together for him. But every single year, on his birthday, we still know it's
Right.
enough.
Right.
We always remember it.
Yeah.
So this day, we never forget.
Right. Right.
Thank you, Ruth. Just sharing for those on Zoom, with sharing about her son's birthday being November 9th, Kristallnacht, and the relationship with his own grandmother, reminding him as she marked that day, and then coming full circle as he got married and started a new chapter of his life. Thank you. Ronnie?
Your father said he'd never want to go back there. Did he identify as a German? If someone would ask him, would he say, I'm a German?
Question about whether he continued to identify as a German despite not wanting to go back again.
I think it was very dependent on the situation. There were, groups of German Jews, Yekas, got together. It was what they knew. And America was a very different thing for him. And it really was dependent on who he was talking to. We were always known as German Jews. The fact that we were Yekas was always there. And at one point, it's in the poem and the film, it just didn't make the poem. When my parents were in Jerusalem one time and in a hotel, they had a German waiter in the hotel. And the German waiter's going, where are you from? So my father he knew he was German, and he just said, oh, from New York. And then when the German waiter said to him, oh, you should come and live in Israel because it's home, my father said, home is anywhere they let you in. And he knew that because people were trying to get out anywhere. The Germans wanted them gone. It was a little too much money and too much work to try to kill them all. But there were quotas, and countries wouldn't take German Jews in. So there was no place to go. And just when my father told me that story, I almost fell over. All the things that meant, that here's a German non-Jewish waiter living in Jerusalem telling them that this is what their home is. And really their home was any place they took you in.
Seth?
A comment and a question. So you mentioned Bennett Avenue, and this year Dr. Ruth Westheimer passed away. We lost her. She was a pillar of the community. And Hebrew Tabernacle Synagogue, the Reformed synagogue right on facing Bennett Park, was historically a Yeki Reformed synagogue. And I heard Dr. Ruth speak there, and it was very moving to hear her recounting, and it was Kristallnacht. And the other thing that's very moving about that synagogue is the staircases leading from the sanctuary level to the basement are lined with photographs of the shuls that were burnt on Kristallnacht and otherwise destroyed in Germany.
Right.
And they also have the Zichron Bücher, with just the names and nothing else in those books on display.
Yeah.
So, and also Breuer's is on Fenner Avenue, and Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, which I think also was a
Yeah.
German Yankee.
Mhm.
So what was it like in that community with German Jews, a German Jewish enclave?
Well,
The question again, just
yeah.
some beautiful reflection about Hebrew Tabernacles and other dimensions of Washington Heights' Yeki community, and asking a little more about growing up in that environment.
Well, when my father came to this country, he was part of the Grand Concourse Yekas. And I know that he said there were shuls on almost every block kind of thing. And it was a real community. Washington Heights was its community. I don't know as much. This was before I was born. So, but I know his oldest cousin was a member of Breuer's. And there were some, there were German stores. If for people who got out early enough, they could buy linens that matched what they brought or all the things that they were able to bring. But I don't know enough about that.
Dorothy?
What? Yeah.
What were the family connections,
Yeah.
those who were connected from before the war?
I mean, they were close. They were all that they had. And they didn't have other relatives. I remember a friend of mine talking about these family get-togethers where there'd be 100 people. And I didn't understand that, because maybe there were, I don't know, 15 of us. And so we've stayed close, because that's all we have. And we have this shared family history.
This feels like a good place to, despite geographical distance.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good place to pause. To thank you, Janet, for
Thank you.
telling your family story in your voice. To thank Chana and Gio and Yael and all those who made tonight possible, as always. The
I
last
just
word.
want to end with this. During the last 6 months of my father's life, he was very concerned about Holocaust memory. And he kept telling me that people should remember what happened. And it's now up to us to remember. And I want to thank you all for being here and for hearing this story. And hopefully it will cause people to remember and to reflect and to think and just what happened in one person's life out of the 6 million dead and those who survived. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks in person, on Zoom. And good night to all.
Thank you, everybody on Zoom.